So we're going to talk about some heavy things that might be on your minds as data leaders today, but have no fear. We're going to actually give you some very tactical, implementable strategies that you can take back with you. So first of all, those of you who filled out the survey that Domino sent out, thank you for doing that. I wanted to, let you know sort of we have the good and the challenging column. So on the good, what we saw in the survey, and by the way, this survey is an extract from a larger AI assessment that we at NavAlytix do called the AIQ assessment. And so some of the questions that you saw were part of that assessment framework that we've developed. Anyway, the good, we see lots of you moving fast to see where AI can help. However, lots of use cases need prioritization and people's pipelines are very full and we're seeing things not go into production. Secondly, expectations are very high for what we're calling return on AI, ROAI. But those measurements for success and impact are not agreed upon at the start, at the very beginning. We're seeing that people are agreeing on those things after they've done a few use cases and then, oh no, there's pressure. Got to do that up front. We're going to talk about that today. And then commitment from leadership to adopt. There's verbal commitments there, but formalized incentives, like the things that make it sticky and hold people accountable, are not in place. So anyway, without further ado, so Linda and I, as you can see, we have been around the block in a number of different organizations, large, small, financial services, telecommunications, technology, and we've been in operating and strategy roles. And a lot of our experiences are kind of formulating the backbones of our company, NavAlytix. But over the past several years, we get lots of, asks for help and inquiries from people through emails, et cetera. And so we decided to take some of those and do our own sort of version of Dear Abby, but we're calling it Dear CDAO. So the first one. Dear CDAO, my company has caught the AI bug. They are hell-bent on using AI and expect miracles. But our data is in shambles and everyone's trying to do their own thing and nobody wants to work together. Does this sound familiar? It's like they're in competition and there's a turf war. There isn't any strategy and our lawyers are afraid. Oh, I don't know what happened there. Ooh. All right, I lost the video, but I'll let you guys figure that out. Okay, here we go. All right, sorry about that. So I was talking about lawyers, right? And we just had one on the stage. So our lawyers are afraid of our company ending up in the headlines because of some AI gaffe. It takes months to get a use case and data usage approved. And our business leaders are getting very impatient with the lack of progress and just want us to put AI everywhere like it is fairy dust. What is a poor data lover to do?
Well, that's a tough one, but I'm going to have to say, dear poor data lover, we do understand your pain, and there's a lot of it going around. You're dealing with a bad case of transformation-itis, but there are cures. And let's peel back the onion and wave away the fairy dust. And I'm going to take you through 3 things that I've learned in a methodology that we've been using at NavAlytix. So we've been talking about AI all day long. And there are so many places and ways to leverage AI, and it's so tempting to point it at whatever is nearby and looks like it could be useful. But unfortunately, pet projects don't typically result in the greatest ROI. For that, you actually need a strategy. And to begin to form a strategy, you need to begin by formulating your organization's value tree. And this is a notion that we've been perpetuating now for a few years here. It started certainly with my experiences at Verizon. And this is where we believe that the conversation really needs to begin with the business. This is how the business leaders and the data science leaders can actually engage in a conversation. So what I'm showing you right now is actually a few excerpts from a value tree from a company that we've been working with that focuses on payment solutions and subscription management. And again, these you're going to see a much more complicated one in a minute. You begin by actually connecting with the business. What are the main activities of an organization? And then you basically pull the thread and you start identifying what are the most AI-able opportunities that are out there, whether that be smart dunning or whether that be payment method optimization. I'm not going to read through all of these, but these are the opportunities that exist in just that one area of subscription management. However, I'm going to have to say that this is actually an excerpt from a telco value tree where you get to see really how extensive the opportunities are, whether you're talking about network optimization, personalization, fraud detection. There is a myriad of opportunities here. And quite honestly, during my time at Verizon, we had hundreds of opportunities on our value tree. And that's why it's so important to engage with the business using this, because as a data science person, I wouldn't know where to begin. And so one of the things that is super important as you start to take a look at this value tree and decide what you're going to be focusing on is this notion of developing a measurement framework. And here I outlined the potential upside in dollars, but that's not the only upside that you can be driving. And so a large part of the upside that you're going to be seeing here is going to be in other kinds of KPIs. And so before you begin to do a project, you've got to have your measurement framework. Because if you do not, you're not going to be able to express to the business what their investment with your team has actually created. And this is a step that I see so many organizations not doing. And we hear again and again, we did this investment, we did this experimentation, but I'm not seeing any ROI. So what is absolutely key here is that you figure out how you're going to demonstrate it. And it's not just a detail. This is essential, because if you do not do this, you're going to find yourself endlessly on the defensive. And I don't know if, does everybody here know how to approach measurement? Does anybody here know how to approach measurement? It's kind of telling, right? I mean, how many other activities do you go about engaging in where there's no notion of measuring what good looks like? Pretty essential step here. I'm going to move on to number 3, which is another really key notion that we developed extensively at Verizon, which is understanding what the path to value is. What is the path to value? It really answers the question of what needs to be true to realize an AI opportunity. And here I'm just taking a look at subscription data readiness. We talked about subscription with Dot, that company that I showed you before. If you take a look at these Harvey balls and you will start seeing that there is a pattern in here, that if you were to focus on market context, finish up the data around customer, and actually get some subscription master data in place, look at all the different AI opportunities that could come to life. And so one of the big challenges that, when I first arrived at Verizon was that there was a ton of work that had to be done with the data. Endless opportunities, as you saw, hundreds of them, but where do we begin? We needed to do this type of analysis with the data, and lo and behold, there were certain data assets that we developed that actually paid off in spades, and I'll give you an example of one. We figured out how to calculate, glean, a score that really expressed a customer's perception of their customer experience. That was a really tough thing to figure out. So it wasn't just your, common customer experience metrics. We really were sensitive to the fact that the perception of the experience was what mattered. And I'll explain why. For some people, a dropped call might be catastrophic, right? They talked to their mother. They were in an intense conversation. For other people, a dropped call doesn't matter at all because their focus is gaming. So what matters to one enormously does not necessarily matter to another customer. So getting that score in place mattered. Using that notion of the perception of the experience, we were able to improve customer retention, obviously customer experience in terms of how customer service was relating to somebody who called up. And we also drove how 5G was being rolled out and where investment dollars were going to upgrade the network. Obviously, there were other assets that came into play, but that was the real opener for us. And so one asset can make a world of difference in terms of your AI agenda. So it's super important to step back. The other thing that this slide is trying to tell you is that the path to value is not only about the data. We actually work with 9 dimensions. I think that's important to know, but I'm highlighting 4 of them here. Culture, tech, talent, data, all of them are on the path to value. So when you're figuring out your path to value, you need to take them all into consideration. And that will allow you to actually drive ROI because you're going to make investments where it matters, accomplishing things that matter to the business. So I think these are really important lessons.
Thank you, dear CDAO.
Let me see, do we have another? Look, we've got another letter.
Oh, fantastic.
All righty. Dear CDAO, it's been 6 months since you wrote me back. I took your advice, and we were off to the races. It was great. My team was making tangible differences in 3 areas where we focused. Leveraging the value tree framework you suggested, we focused on those areas where our data was trustworthy, where we had the biggest opportunities to infuse AI, and where we were tightly aligned to our overall business strategy, which was to, 1, increase our market share by covering more industries, going wide and creating new products, going deep, using automation and machine learning, improving how our customers engage with us and how our existing products use agents. And then in addition, we reduced our data center ops by 50% and showed that we can increase our throughput for new products by 150%. We hit it out of the park. However, my team is being blocked on adoption of these proven AI models by a senior leader in the company. He doesn't understand the value and is unwilling to back this effort. So what's a desperate data lover to do?
Dear desperate data lover, wow. I'm sure many of you have probably experienced some of these things. I have felt this also in more than one role and certainly talked to a lot of other CDAOs that have also experienced this. Despite having that seat at the C-suite table and proving without a doubt that this can really work and make a tangible difference and align to a company strategy, teams can still get roadblocked. That said, there is help on the way to course correct. So, first strategy, talk to your CEO, your CFO, your COO about overlaying a shared incentive structure. Now, this is not we're all in on AI and we agree on this ROI and it's in a PowerPoint deck. This is like a contract, and I really mean a contract that creates accountability. It defines that North Star that everyone is marching towards, whether that's a customer-facing goal or an internally developed tool. These are specifically and explicitly part of your annual goals and objectives, and they appear in kickoff presentations at the beginning of the year in everybody's domain, not just the chief data officers, because they're considered that important. Unfortunately, shared incentives are often absent from data and AI transformations because they're not viewed as key steps in the process. And that leaves the chief data and analytics leader to kind of aspirationally operate without sufficient support. True shared incentives should come in the form of metrics that are tied to compensation. And yes, I mean compensation. And annual development goals that start with the appropriate C-level member and they trickle down into the department. So back to your market growth objective that you mentioned, there are several incentives across the C-suite that I would recommend that could ensure your objective is successfully met. So for example, marketing is given a target for cultivating the best net new prospects, but it includes applying your tested and governed AI model indicating most likely to buy or whatever. Sales is given a revenue target for net new customers, and not just the usual sales net new customer target, but it is also using a governance approved definition of what a new customer is. I don't know how many of you have gotten into healthy debates in your organization about what is a net new customer, and the sales organization has a different definition of net new customer. That's always a fun one. And then customer success is measured by their ability to onboard new customers in the best way possible, leveraging the AI agents that your team built in conjunction with their team. And so I say these things because the specifics really, really matter here.
Heidi, if I could just add one observation here. So this is very ambitious, but I think it also kind of reinforces the need to get business leadership behind this, because these incentives are not going to come into being without the support of the business leadership. And that's why it's so important to have that agreement that you're working on the most important things for them, and you're doing it in the most effective way. And so shadow the leader.
That's right. Yep. If they don't sign up for these metrics, then that's an indication you shouldn't be working on that. So it's sort of like the put your money where your mouth is.
Exactly.
So the other thing that that I have employed that I think is really, really important, we talk a lot about progress tracking via operating models, but I have seen all too often that the data organizations are desperate to show value, and so we issue a status report once a month or an infographic once a quarter at the end of the year, and we say, here's a list of all the great things we did, and sometimes we'll list the business benefits, but we had to come up with those numbers on the benefit side, and that's the problem. Well, it's a problem because there's a whole lot of pressure on you to go bang on people's doors and email them over and over again and say, what was the lift that you got on that marketing campaign for that model that we developed? That's not the way to go about doing this. They need to come back and give you what that data was and what that impact was. They're responsible for filling in the blank with that number that goes on the scorecard. And it's not your scorecard, it's the organization's scorecard. So it is the group's transformation and progress that you're making on data and AI. It's not the data team or the data science team. And I can't emphasize that enough. So how do you get there? Appoint a steering committee with executives from different functions, but just coming together for monthly check-ins and like getting updates on what's going great and what's not going so well isn't sufficient in itself. Those check-ins need to be very open, honest discussions on where transformation is making a difference, where is data and AI and analytics making a difference, and it's got to be down to the day in the life of. Like, how has this affected the day in the life of the marketing team, the finance team, the sales team, the product team? So that's where the conversation needs to be. And as I mentioned, it's too often that the data leaders driving that agenda, preparing the materials, and if you don't get those numbers from them, then they're not going to recognize them, and you'll often fall into the trap of the data teams taking credit for something that they shouldn't, or the data team stretching the impact, and we're not really getting that kind of impact. So I won't lie, this took me like a year to get to this point in probably the last 2 places that I was at, with different levels of success. And it's not easy, and it doesn't happen overnight. And you can't just march into your, transformation leader's office and say, we have to have this, it's got to happen. But I wouldn't take on a role trying to do this unless there was motivation and commitment to put something like this in place. So, so really, the specifics make things sticky. And shared incentives are the keys to adoption of any kind of data science, or AI transformation. And sometimes it can be really hard to get companies to transform unless there's this catalyst, like your stock price is going down, you've lost market share, there's bad, headline in the newspaper. And unfortunately, it's rare that companies will just rally behind transformation because we know it's the right thing to do. But if you employ some of these things, you can at least have, I think, a lot better chance of success. And I wanted to address the pyramid that we have here. This is, we call it our 9-dimension framework to ensure that AI is successful. A lot of our talk today has focused on the strategy part, the measurement part, and the operating model part. And we focus on that a lot because we feel that these are the areas that are all too often neglected, and there's not enough, emphasis put on there. Lots of companies will stand up governance organizations, buy the technology, we invest in some data cleanup. We're seeing more AI and data literacy programs popping up. We're hiring people, but the things in the top of this pyramid, the top 2 levels, you got to have that, and you really have to work hard on that. So I'm going to let Linda wrap us up.
So last year, I opened up by describing myself as a recovering CDAO, and as you can see, Heidi is one as well. It's a tough job, and being in this space is tough because this is digital transformation, and that requires a lot. So wanted you guys to walk away with just some of these takeaways. Map your organization's value tree. It's going to make you much more effective in having conversations with business leaders and getting the support that you need. Agree up front before you go far on how to measure value. That'll help you not end up in a defensive position. Establish those shared incentives. Without them, you're going to find yourself facing often a lot of passive-aggressive behavior, sometimes not so passive. And take the time and really analyze your path to value. It's going to pay off. You're going to get to the point where you're really returning true value so much faster if you do this piece of analysis.